All right, well that video was one of our former interns talking about First Glance, and I'm going to kind of go back and start you off at the beginning of First Glance so you kind of have a feeling for what was the impetus for all this to happen. In the Kenmore community, for years, I married into the Kenmore community. My husband refused to leave when we got married, and he did not want to leave, but I became very integrated into it. And there was always a problem of kids on the boulevard, and that was everyone's issue. They said, there's kids on the boulevard, they're getting in trouble, and I talked to pastor after pastor in the area, and they always said that was a common theme. They said, if we just had a youth pastor on the boulevard, our problems would be solved. Well, so the time came when I was at a church. I was working inside the doors of the church, just as a volunteer, and another friend of mine was inside the doors of the church. And it was a Wednesday night, and we were supposed to be in this room doing quizzing with the kids. And we were both bored, so we were out in the hallway fooling around. And I said to her, I would so much rather be out in a park reaching kids who didn't know Jesus than I would kids who were inside the building. And is this too loud? Because my mother-in-law's holding her ears. No? Okay. Okay. All right, good. So anyways, we decided at that moment that if we had the opportunity to jump ship and go out and reach kids in the community, we would do it. So we thought, we're going to start thinking this way. So the time came when we were ready to start it. We were looking for a place to start it, and we couldn't really nail any place down. And I was kind of afraid to say Kenmore because nobody did anything like that in Kenmore. So I thought, well, there's kind of a need in Kenmore, so let's go look at it. And sure enough, we were able to set up the community center to do a setting that was going to be comfortable for church kids to bring their unsaved friends, and maybe we'd pull in some community kids. So we went to the community center, and they said, that's a great idea, but you can't talk about Jesus inside the doors of the community center. I thought, well, that's good. We're going to be outside. When these kids want to make a decision, we'll just take them outside and talk to them. But she said, we talked to her more about it, and she said, oh, so it's going to be for the kids in the community as well. And I said, yes, it's going to be for the community kids. So we started off, and we went to the middle school in Kenmore, and we stood just across the lines where you're allowed to stand and do things that the school doesn't like. So we were right across the lines, and there was I don't know if you know Ennis Middle School, there's a lot of geese there. Okay, a lot of geese. So anyways, we stood in a lot of goose poop every week, and we handed out flyers to these kids who were walking the direction of the community center. And we said, hey, junior high hangout, free pizza, pop, come hang out. And that's pretty much all we had to offer them. So we got it going. The first night, we thought, well, we'll have 5 kids. And I was bringing 3 of them. So I thought, okay, we'll have 5 kids. We were set for 5 kids. We got there, and there were kids outside the door waiting for us already. And we started out with probably 25 kids our first night in the community center. That is a senior center. Okay, so we had to roll all these tables away. And they had like these snowflake popsicle crafts, stick crafts hanging from the ceiling. So we couldn't use balls because we were going to break their crafts. And so we played all of our games with rolls of toilet paper so that we didn't break the senior citizens' crafts. And the kids had a great time. But what we realized was these kids, is week after week, they would get there early. There would always be kids waiting for us. But when we got inside, they would never talk to us. So we, for the first year, experienced a lot of rejection. We would walk up to a group of kids, and I would say, hey, how was school today? And they would say, oh, it was all right. And they kind of mumble. And you would be in the middle of a sentence, and 7 kids would just turn around and walk away from you. Every week, these kids did this. It was just rejection after rejection. And they did that to us for a year. But the numbers kept growing. And we polled. What we found was that the kids from the church that were supposed to bring their unsaved friends got really scared of the Kenmore kids. So it didn't even last a month. And it became a Kenmore outreach, just like that. And so that was the direction that it turned, and the church started using it as a prerequisite for the inner city missions trips. That was kind of interesting that they would bring them to us first before they took them to a real inner city, but that is what they did. And the outreach grew, and we polled the toughest kids around. We polled this one little guy. I will never forget him. He was probably 14 years old, but he was only this high, and he smoked cigars. And he would sit outside the building, and he would smoke cigars and wait for us to start. And he was totally out of control, and I literally could have set on him to control him. I don't know why his parents couldn't control him, but they couldn't. But we pulled these kind of kids. We pulled the really rough ones that nobody wanted to have in their programming, the kids that fell through the cracks, the kids that weren't showing up at school, the kids whose parents were totally frustrated. So our program began to grow. So we probably were running 75 kids, and we said, wow, we'd like to take this program every week here at the community center. And they said, well, you can't because the Girl Scouts are using the building. So we thought, okay. So we went back to the church that we were working out of, and we said, what do you think about renting some space for us? And they said, we've never done that before. We don't think it's a good idea. And we thought, well, okay, well, that never stops me because I will always find a back door to go in. So we just kind of pursued that, and we found a building that they had just dropped the rent on in Kenmore. And I kind of called the guy, and I'm kind of good at selling things, so I sold him our sob story, and he dropped the rent a little bit more. We went back to the church and literally begged and begged some more, talked to the youth pastor. They said they'd pull it out of their budget if the church would sign the contract for it, and they did. So we moved into a space that was 5,000 square feet, which was great, and enabled us to do so much more. We moved into that space. We jumped from 75 kids to 200, a minimum, when we would open the doors. And the whole pretense of what we did was we built relationships with these kids in order to tell them about Christ. Okay, we started out sitting them down and making them listen to like a 10-minute sermon, which was a fiasco. We gave them like those chewing gum suckers to keep their mouths busy so they would listen for like 10 minutes. That didn't work. We found that it did so much better to befriend them. And after that year, they started to like us because they realized we were in it for the long haul. So we were in this building. We had 200, 300 kids coming when we would open the doors. We had leaders, just like yourselves. Doesn't take anybody extra special to come. They would come and they would hang out with the kids. And through those interactions, you were able to have impact in their life. And when you have impact in their life, you're able to tell them about Jesus and how Jesus has touched your life in that same kind of situation. So we're on a good road here. We're doing things with the kids that they don't usually do. We had an alley behind our building, and we would just do basic things with these kids, like we would jump rope, the big group jump rope. We got the long rope, and everybody jumps at once. And these kids loved it because they had not really had the opportunity to be kids. Okay, they were in situations that were very adult-like. They'd seen things they should not have seen growing up. A lot of them faced a lot of abuse, a lot of violence, a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs, a lot of parents in jail, a lot of abandonment. So these kids actually like doing really basic kid-like things. So we would have this, we would sit in the alley and we would jump rope. Now you would think that it would be the girls that jumped rope, all right? It was the boys, okay? Now you have to picture our Kenmore boys, okay? Wife beaters are standard. Wife beaters, if you don't know what that is, it's the skinny white t-shirt that's real tight. And they would wear the baggy shorts that were too big by at least 3 sizes, and they had the boxers, and they would belt them low, okay? And they would have their bright tennis shoes or whatever. But when they jump rope, their knives fall out of their pockets. So we made a list of the top 10 things you will never hear at church. And one of them was, hey dude, you dropped your knife. Because that was just what happened. So all these things started falling out of their pockets. And for me, I could go back and I could remember seeing them hit the ground, and we would just laugh because these kids that were forced into such adult situations were kids. And we were able just to enjoy those times with them. But we had one situation one week where I was sitting back in the alley, and it was just a fun place to be because inside was kind of like a zoo. There were balls flying all the time, and skateboarders and kids running around just being kids. So the alley was the quiet spot, and there was one family that we had kind of befriended. I just had a soft spot in my heart for the girls. The parents had both been incarcerated. The dad was raising the kids because the mom was currently in jail. And this one girl who we had taken on an outing, and she had punched the now director's husband, just to kind of give you a thing of her mentality. She was a hitter. She was sitting out in the alley with me, and she told me she was pregnant. And she was only like 14 years old. And I was like, oh man, you're pregnant. And she was kind of happy about it. And so she came back a few weeks later, and she had miscarried. And I thought, and it's terrible to say this, but I thought, wow, thank you, God, you kind of handled this one. before, this baby had to live this kind of life. And so she told me at that moment, she said, I'm going to get pregnant again. And I said, I don't think that's such a good idea. And she said, nope, I really want to get pregnant. And sure enough, she did. And she got pregnant really fast. And oddly enough, at my ripe old age of 43, I had another baby. Okay, so I had just had a baby myself, so I kind of knew the questions to ask her. Like, prenatal questions, like what does the doctor say? How much do you weigh? Are you gaining enough weight? So I was able to maintain relationship with her through this because I had just done it. So she had a baby, but she had two babies. She had twins, okay? And these twins were in this home where it was herself and her three younger siblings being raised by their dad, who had no driver's license, and they came clear from the other side of Kenmore. So when they would come to First Glance with these babies, it was almost like this little parade. And it was almost like a scene from Jungle Book where the little boys being raised by the animals. Because you would see these really rough kids, and they're pushing these strollers, and there's basketballs bouncing along with them, and they're walking across Kenmore to get to First Glance. So she brought these babies one night, and we would hold them, and I would ask again the right questions because I knew them. And she had a boy with her one night who was not the dad of these babies. She wasn't with the dad, so it wasn't a big secret. And I looked at the baby and I said, they must look a lot like their dad because they don't look like you. And she leaned over to me and very quietly she said, you can't say that. She said, he doesn't like to hear that. And at that very moment, this boy who was sitting with her cast me the nastiest glare. And I just thought, ooh, this is kind of cold here. And so that night, my friend, Noelle, who's now the director of First Glance, we were cleaning up the alley, and I said, something happened tonight, and I don't have a good feeling about it. And I just kind of feel like we're going to read about it in the paper one day. And that was all I said. And we always had these conversations, because there was always a crisis. There's always something bad going on. So I didn't think too much about it. I didn't see the babies. About 3 months later, I got a call at about 10 o'clock at night, and they said, you need to turn on the news. And I thought, oh no, that's never good. And I turned on the news, and there was this mother, and she was sobbing, and there was video clips of people giving their statements. And she and this baby dad had brutally murdered one of these twin babies while at the grandparents' house. And she was at the grandparents' house because she had called CSB on her father, and they had placed her at the grandparents' house. But they let this boy stay there with her. So they had murdered this baby. And it was really bad. And the funeral for it was very, very dysfunctional. If I could describe it to you, I don't think the words even encompass what it was. But this funeral was so dysfunctional that these siblings of this girl who had killed her baby were all operating on their own. There were adults in the back, and it was almost as if each one had their own private hell they were living in. So none of them comforted anyone. And these kids, these little kids, like the mother was only, she's 16, I think, when this happened. And then her siblings were all younger than her, were all sobbing, all during these calling hours. No one walked up and put their arm around them. No one comforted them. No one was there for them. And the father of these babies stood for 2 hours at this casket. And he'd only seen these babies a couple times. And he's just this young kid, and he's standing there, and he's got these new white tennis shoes on, and he's real skinny. And he just stood at the side of this casket and sobbed. And I could count on one hand the number of adults that went in a 2-hour period and put their arm around this boy. And it was like, what is going on here? So the funeral started, and there weren't chairs enough for everyone. So the kids, these siblings, all sat on the floor in front of the casket. And these adults, who were all functioning in whatever grief they were in, were all in the back of the room. And it was like, I have never seen anything like this. And then the mother of the baby started to scream that she wanted her babies back, and she was hysterical, left the funeral, and no one went out with her. And I thought, I can't have her out there screaming. You could hear her coming through the windows and the walls of the funeral home. So I went out with her in the front of the funeral home, and my friend, again, who's the director, was afraid I was going to get punched while I was out there because, again, this girl when she gets upset, she hits people. So I was out there with her, and we left that funeral. Well, before that, I had talked to the undertaker, and he kept asking me how'd the baby look. Did I think it was pretty? And I said she was beautiful. She looked like a China doll. She had this pink knit hat on and this pink sweater, and her cheeks, she looked like one of those dolls that you order through the magazine. She was just beautiful. And I said, no, I said, she was beautiful, you did a great job. And I found out later, and I can't say that this is for sure, because I didn't hear it from a medical source, but I did hear it from people that were very close in, that they had broken every bone in that baby's upper torso. And so for the funeral director to be able to reconstruct that baby so that she was presentable was a big deal. So we left that funeral. I was in one car and Noelle was in another, and I called her and I said, did you see any part of that baby except her face? And she said, I don't think we did. And that was the only part of the baby that was showing. And I thought, what had that baby gone through? What had it endured? You know, that was all that they were able to reconstruct for that. So we left that, and we were honestly haunted by that. And I thought to myself, and Noelle did too, I thought, I couldn't work with these moms. This is terrible. We had seen previously another mom who had been in the alley with a baby, and it was October, and it had a onesie on, and the kids were all smoking, and this baby was just passed from person to person all down the alley. And it was like she had no idea where it was at, and the baby was cold. So it really burdened us to start this for teen moms. I thought, my goodness, I have to do something. I can't do another dead baby. This is horrible. So we thought, okay, take $200, which I was going to go to a thrift store and buy some baby things, and we were going to expand our programming to go into the teen moms because there was an obvious need for it. So I started to get things together, and then I got a cancer diagnosis. And I was out for a year with breast cancer and treatments for that, so everything was put on hold. But while I was out for that year, they started calling me and they said, we have this girl that is changing her baby on the toilet. And this is a young staff. They're very honest. They said, do you think that's a problem? And I'm like, well, I think that might be a little bit of a problem. So they so what should we do with her? And I said, well, you should probably tell her not to change the baby on the toilet, and we should maybe get her some things she needs. So they got her some diapers and some food because she indicated she was hungry. And they called me a few days later and they said, we can't track her down. She keeps giving us addresses, but we don't know where she's at. And it didn't click with me then. And I thought, well, keep looking for her, I'm not sure. But, again, I was out of the loop and I was just kind of directing them from the side. And I got another call later on when I was finishing up treatments, and this baby had died. And the baby had died because the baby, the mother of the baby, and the grandma were all homeless, and they were floating from home to home. And the grandmother had the baby on someone's couch and rolled over on it during the night. And so we had that funeral, and again, it was another dysfunctional funeral. The mother of the baby wanted to walk back from the cemetery up at Rolling Acres to First Glance on the boulevard. She just wanted to walk there afterwards. So it's like we had this funeral dinner we had, and she wasn't there because she was still on foot. And it was just, everything about this was dysfunctional, and it was bad. And to see another baby dead just ripped my heart out. So I thought, you know what? I have a baseball hat, and I am going to put it on my head, and I'm going to come back into things, and we're going to get this Teen Moms program going. So I called every girl I could at First Glance. I said, who's pregnant, who has a baby? And so we got, I got a hold of 2 girls, and I said, come to First Glance, we're going to have a hangout. So this one girl came. I had one girl my first week, and she came without her baby, and I had 2-hour slots scheduled. I thought, what am I going to do with her? And I had brought Oreos and Coke. Okay, this was in my early days before I realized that was probably a good thing for them. But so we sat there for 2 hours, and we ate Oreos and we drank Coke. And I thought when she left, I will never see this girl again. This had to be the most boring time of her life. And she's not going to come back and hang out with this old lady and who didn't feed her or anything. So the next week she came back and she brought her baby. And another girl came and she brought her baby. And then I realized that one girl alone was eating about 15 Oreos. And I thought, she's hungry. And so I thought, okay, I'll bring my leftovers. So I started bringing my leftovers, and they started eating my leftovers. And they started bringing their baby dads with them, and they ate my leftovers. And I didn't have enough leftovers. So I went to the Kiwanis Club, and I said, can I have your leftovers from your meetings on Tuesday? And then I picked up their food. And it just built. And before I knew it, I had a Teen Moms program. And we needed food, and we needed all these things. And little by little, God blessed what we did, and we were able to speak into the lives of these girls. So Teen Moms now has grown from teen moms to young moms, because I never thought these girls would get older. I don't know what I was thinking, but it didn't dawn on me that they would get older, and it didn't dawn on me that they wouldn't want to leave. And so they like sticking around. If they get jobs or whatever, they still always come back. So we have a teen moms program now, a young moms program. And then we saw the need because they were bringing their baby dads, and I also had one boy whose baby was dropped off on his doorstep. Again, he had no food, no resources. He started coming, and so he was doing all the activities the girls were doing. So I have one teen dad or young dad who knows how to sew, and he makes really nice pot holders if anybody would like one. But he did all the activities the girls would do. That we started meeting with the young dads. And so my husband, he works with some other men and works with the young dads. So, and again, I didn't think of the girls growing older, and I didn't think of their kids growing older. So what happens in a nursery, as my kids are getting older, they're too big for the nursery, and they start stepping on the babies, and kicking the babies, and they're not well disciplined. So I thought, well, we need to have a place for these babies to go. So we started Tiny Glancers. So Tiny Glancers is for all the kids who are 3 years old and up. So Tiny Glancers, I needed more volunteers, I needed more space, I needed just everything we do at First Glance is generated by a need. It's not like we set out with this grand vision. It's like if there's a need, we're going to try and meet it. So Tiny Glancers became its own beast. We had a fundraiser last year. We raised $75,000 for a learning center upstairs in the building to be able to work with these kids so that they're ready for school. Because a lot of these kids lead lives you would not imagine. They will get up in the morning and their mom will pop them in a stroller, and they will spend all day on the boulevard in a stroller. And any interaction they have with people is generally not good interaction. So the kids, they're not exposed to a lot of good things. So if we can work with them and work with their moms to work with them during the week, the kids are going to stand a little bit better chance in school. So we have a Tiny Glancers program now. And what your church has done, which has been phenomenal, is that you began to support First Glance monthly. But what you did recently is really, really good. And I'm going to share this with you if you don't know. I told Dallas that we needed a security door for teen moms because these girls don't make good choices in boys. And there have been times I've had to hire police officers because they are with guys who are in gangs. And when gang guys get mad, they come with guns. All right? These boys on Facebook will show pictures of themselves unwrapping guns. They'll show pictures of all the money they've got from the drug sales they've made. They get really mad at the girls. So I've had times that I thought, man, what am I going to do if one of these guys shows up here with a gun? I had just an instance a couple weeks ago where, well, not a couple weeks ago, it was before I talked to Dallas, that one of my girls had been shot at by her baby dad from a car. And we're standing in front of the building, and she was telling me about it. And as she told me about it, she said, that's the car. And she said, but wait, he's in jail. That can't be him. And here it was his girlfriend looking for her. And the next thing we knew, that car turned and went up this young mom's street. And she said, they're looking for me. She's coming to shoot me. And I thought, oh no. So her mom called on the phone and said, hey, they're here looking for you, but I didn't tell them where you're at. And I thought, oh my gosh, what would have happened if that mom would have said, oh yeah, she's at Teen Moms right now. That girl with the gun would have showed up at us. So I said, we need a security door so badly. I'm so fearful for these kids because we want to protect the kids. So I talked to Dallas. We had $600 in contributions from a lady who works on our program. You guys gave us a $2,000 check to get that security door. And I thought, this is great. We got enough money. I was so excited. The estimate came in last week at $2,500 and some dollars. So it was perfect. So thank you. So the order is in, and we're going to have a security door. And Dallas indicated to me that you guys really care about the kids. When he said, we want this money to go to First Glance, he said, we want to feed little kids. And I said, well, we do a lot more than feed little kids. Okay? The little kids that we've got, when the teen moms come in and young moms, they eat dinner with their kids at night. Okay? As a family. The kids go to their own programming. The moms are taught. The moms, they don't get any handouts. Everything they do, they earn. They have checkbook registers that they mark down how many points they earn, and they can go into our boutique and they can buy the things their kids need with the points they earn. So it's a great way for the moms to provide for their kids, and so we meet the needs of the kids on so many levels. I'm so excited that you're involved in that. And First Glance, meeting the needs of these kids as they get older. We have a young men's abstinence group, but we don't call it an abstinence group because boys don't want to tell people they're part of an abstinence group. So they're called Man Up. And we have a girls' abstinence group called Ladies Night Out. We have open rec nights on Thursday. We have a skate park that somebody donated $26,000 to build. It's an indoor skate park. It's phenomenal. We have a young adults program for the kids who just still don't get it. Okay, they're still learning about Christ. We have a Bible study in my Teen Moms and Young Moms program. It took me 6 years to get enough girls interested to be able to even do a Bible study. So now, with our kids, we're doing a Bible lesson with them. The girls can go home and teach that lesson to their kids from their Bible study. So we are meeting the needs of God's enabled us to do this, and He has enabled you as a church to be the hands and feet of Jesus. So if you want to volunteer there in any of those areas, we would love to have you. And I don't want to hear you say you're too old, because Ruth, stand up. Okay, this is known as Grandma at the pizza counter, all right? She serves pizza on Thursday nights, and that's all she does. She says, I don't want to touch the money because I'll miscount it. But she can put a slice of pizza on a plate, and the kids love her. When she's not there, they want to know where she's at. So, if you can be there in person to volunteer, we have so many opportunities. If you want to hold babies, if you want to work with little kids on their letters, if you want to skateboard, maybe somebody'd like to do that. You could do any of those things. But you, through your giving, you really are. You're doing that work right there with us. And I can't thank you enough for that.
Oh, now I know why I've ate so many pizzas the last 14 years. Let me give you the time real quick. What time is it? 5 till. Thank you, sweetheart. So, obviously, Karen came from Cuyahoga Falls, and it was my idea to stay in Kenmore. She came from the Falls, and I said, no, of course, we're going to be in Kenmore. Where else? And Lord obviously turned that around to use in His behalf. And for those of you who don't know, when she said baby dad, that is slang for the father of the little infant. All right, in case you didn't know, I learned all these terms. So baby dad, and what she didn't tell you is that she's leaving right now because here in about 10 minutes there's going to be a dedication of a new room that they built for the, what they call the tiny glancers, the 3 to 5 year olds. If you want to go by and see it, 949 Kenmore Boulevard. If any of you remember where the old Bro Dry Cleaners was, or the Hibernians Club. Okay, hopefully you don't remember where the Hibernians Club was, but if any of you know, that's the two buildings that they actually own. They own those buildings, and the Tiny Glancers is going to be in there. I'm just going to take a few minutes. My name is Mike Freeman, and your pastor and I, 35 years ago on a Wednesday night, we were ordained together at the same service on a Wednesday night prayer meeting, and so we've been buds for years, and have loved the Billington family for decades and decades, and just so pleased to see what's happening here and what is taking place. I talked to Dallas for a moment last night. He was over in Jersey, and I said all the stories that I could tell. But I have 5 minutes, and I'm not going to tell any stories. So, but if you would ever like to hear any of those stories, my number is 753-0417. Okay, leave a message. When we think about occupation, every occupation has its first rule. Its first rule. Every occupation has that one thing. If you're going to do this, you can never forget to. Like a carpenter, one of the first rules of carpentry is what? Is to measure and to cut. All right, that's good. That's kind of a first rule. I like to go out to the firing range, and I like to fire my pistol. And one of the first rules is you treat a gun as if it's always. That's exactly right. But just some first rules. The story I heard is about the fellow who actually, thinking about first rules, he was a mechanic on gas furnaces. And one day there was an explosion, and as he was flying up through the air, he saw somebody plummeting towards the earth. And as they were passing, he said to the gentleman, "Do you know anything about gas furnaces?" And the fellow that was plummeting to the earth said, "No, do you know anything about parachutes?" It's just real important that in your occupation you remember those basic rules. And I think for our walk with Christ, there is a basic truth, a basic tenet that we must always remember. It's nothing profound, but if this truth is lost, you now become putty in the hands of the enemy. If this truth is dislodged from your hand, you now become something that is very pliable in the hands of the enemy. And it's simply the truth of the love of God for you. I said nothing profound. But if we lose that truth, just as the carpenter loses his truth about measure twice, cut once, if we lose that truth and we no longer hold that truth in our heart, some pretty ugly things can happen for us as the enemy likes to toy with us. You think about the love of God. We're told that not only does God love, but we are told in 1 John chapter 4 that He is love. Now, that's hard for me to get my head around, to say that somebody is a verb. He is love. 1 John chapter 4. You remember when you first saw your child? Now, mothers start loving those children when? They start loving them in the womb. Okay? But when does a dad usually start loving that child? Well, maybe a little bit before, but a dad usually does it the second he sees that child. It's like, boom, instant love. I remember when my first child was born 31 years ago. And he was born at 1:57 in the afternoon at Akron General Hospital. And I was there, and I got to be there, and I took the pictures. And then shortly thereafter, I ran back to the church that I was working at. And there was my pastor. My pastor looked at me, and he said, instant love, huh? And I thought, oh my gosh, it is it. It is instant love. Think about when you first started loving your children. A real quick history lesson. What was the most monumental thing to happen last year in history? Anybody? What's that? Most monumental thing to happen in history last year. Okay. Think about history. I mean, you realize how long it's been since Kennedy was shot? It's been about 50 years. And then you go back, and 150 years ago, Abraham Lincoln was shot. And then you go back, 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was crucified. And you go back all the way through all of the kings of Mede and Persia. You go all the way back to the time where God created Adam. And I have to ask myself, when did God start loving me? And you know what? God started loving me before He created Adam. God started loving me. In fact, if we could jump in a time capsule and go into eternity past, which has no beginning, and we were to see God sitting on His throne, and we were to walk up and interview Him and say, tell me, a penny for your thoughts. What are you thinking about right now? You know what His answer would be? You. I'm thinking about you. Because the Scripture is very clear over the book of Ephesians that before the foundations of the world were even created, that God looked down and He chose us. He looked down and He loved us. I thought, God kind of had to love me because He created me, and then I got in this mess, and God felt sorry for me. He thought, oh boy, Mike's in a mess. I got to send Christ. The Bible says that God loved us even before we messed up, that we have been on His heart for all eternity past. You say, Mike, I can't get my hands around that. Okay, welcome to humanity. Neither can I. We know that Christ loves us deeply. If we ever forget that first truth, we're in a dangerous place. Unconditional love is the song that you sang. A love that has no conditions. This is another tough place for us. We say, I was talking to somebody about giving the other day. And it's important to give. And we talked about, if somebody wasn't giving, what might be the reaction of God? The reaction of God is, God wouldn't love you one bit less. His love is never conditioned on an action on my part. Think about the way Christ died for us. Romans chapter 5 and verse 8. But God commended His love toward us in that what? In that while we were yet, Christ died for us. while we were still sinners. So God not only loved me in time past before I had fell, God loved me while I was kicking dirt in his face. Remember the cartoons from years ago? The guy would walk around and kick the sand in the face of the skinny guy on the beach. Okay? I was kicking sand in the face of God, and God loved me even at that very moment. How much did he love me? I'll go back, it's about 22 years ago. And my mom and my dad, by the way, Grammy, the one that stood up, that's my mom, all right? Grandma is my mom. But we were in Daytona Beach, and we were staying a little timeshare on the beach. And at that time, I had a son who was probably about 7 or 8 years old, and then a daughter who was about 3 or 4, and then Karen was pregnant with our third born. And we were down in Daytona Beach, having a great time out on the beach. It was August, September, no, that was probably September, October. And all of a sudden, my son, who could swim, said, "Hey, Dad, I'm kind of like stuck here in this water and I can't get out. I keep trying to swim out, and then a wave rolls over me and kind of pulls me back in a hole." And I said, "Okay, hang on a second, I'll come over." So I came over and I said, "Okay, let me help you out." So I grabbed him and started swimming towards the shore, and a wave came and rolled over us and sucked us right back into the same hole. I couldn't touch bottom. I thought, well, that's strange. And so I continued to try to pull him into shore. And after a while, I realized I'm really tired right now. Okay, now this story was 40 pounds ago, but I realized I'm really tired right now. And I said to him, I said, "Mikey, here's what I'm going to do. When the next wave comes over us, I'm going to go down and I'm going to touch the bottom, and then I'm going to put my hand under your rump, and when I come up, I'm going to push you towards shore, and I want you to swim as hard as you can towards shore, and I'll be right there too." "Okay, Dad." Didn't tell him how tired I was. So I go down, put my hand under his rump, and come up, and he starts swimming like a madman towards shore, and I start swimming like a madman, and I look to my right, no Mikey. I look back at my heels, and there he is, getting sucked back into the hole again. I don't know much about the ocean. I've never been a lifeguard, but apparently there was a washout area right there. And if we would have gone to the left, or if we would have gone to the right, or if we would have walked away from shore, we'd have been in water this deep. But to try to get out of that one particular place, we couldn't do it. It just couldn't be done. So Karen's up on the shore, and I'm waving my arms like this, and she didn't have her contacts in, and she stands there and goes, waving, just waving. And then I had the presence of mind. A couple hundred yards up, there was a lifeguard station, and I started pointing to the lifeguard station. Well, then she got it. And this pregnant woman was running down the beach. And within 2 minutes, I had a jet ski at my back. And we threw my son up on the jet ski, and I grabbed onto the back, and he dropped me in the shore. Obviously, had it not been such a perilous situation, I would have felt like a real idiot. But at the time, I was just glad to be alive. 2,000 years ago, I had a choice. I could either save myself and let my boy drown, or I go down with him. Now, what are you going to do? I mean, what every father in this room says is what? I go down with the boy. 2,000 years ago, God essentially swam away from his son and said, "No, you're going to drown in the sea of their iniquity, and I'm not going to be there for it. Wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquity, the chastisement of my peace was put upon him." And finally, at that moment when God swam away from his son and let his son drown in the sea of my transgression, Jesus looked up and said, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Measure twice, cut once. Always pack your own parachute. Never, ever forget the great, great truth of God's unconditional, eternal, everlasting love. We're going to go ahead and bow our heads here. Thank you so much for what City Church is doing for First Glance over in Kenmore. Thank you that you're making a difference in people's lives, and thank you for your generosity and for your compassion that way. I'm not sure how you normally do things, but my sense is that we probably take a moment. If you want to respond, you want to, if it's in your seat, if it's in front of this platform here, it really doesn't matter. But you would just want to respond and say, God, yeah, it's so easy for me to forget. When I sin, when I wander, and when I deliberately just scoot away, it's so easy for me to forget your unconditional love before the foundation of the world. God, so many times it seems like it's up to what I do. It's up to what I say. It's up to what I have performed or have not performed. Ah, the love of God, so rich and pure, so measureless and strong. It shall forevermore endure through all the ages long. It's the love of God. Nothing profound, but remember, He created this world for us. He chose us. He died for us. He cares for us. Hebrews chapter 13, I am the same yesterday, today, and forever. The last promise of Jesus, I will never leave you. I'll never forsake you. Thank you, Father. We pray in your name.